Hello guys, I'm back from another video, and today was about what if Deku was the only boy with a quote-unquote quirk. So, in the last video we talked about after the whole USJ incident, Izuku is currently in the infirmary of UA, basically being arrested. So, after the whole incident, they were told, specifically the parents of UA, that they're going to be having dorms. So the students of UA, or more specifically their parents, allowed them to basically stay in the dorms because it's quote-unquote safer. So all of the students of UA basically, started packing all of their things as they arrived to the dorms. Class 1A was there basically minding their own business, as Bakugo would overhear that All Might and also Izumi were talking about the whereabouts about Izuku. As when she hears about it, being that Izuku is currently in the infirmary of UA, she would basically start moving towards that direction. Mina would basically notice her moving there as she would start to follow her. So when she makes it there, she would see that, Izuku is basically knocked out on the, stretcher of UA, or more specifically in the, infirmary, basically sleeping or in a coma. She would start crying as she starts, saying sorry to him, even though he's basically, in a coma. She would basically be hiding, specifically this girl, aka Mina. Mina would basically notice Bakugo basically crying for this kid, even though she knows that, Bakugo usually prefers to cry if it's, a person that she cares about. And if she saw, Izuku basically, being cared for by this girl, aka Bakugo, which she knows as the most ruthless person imaginable, well, that would mean that this boy is probably pretty important to her. So, after seeing her basically crying, saying that it's all her fault for basically, making him kill himself and turning him into this, well, they would be visited by, well, 3 new people, which were the heroic spirits that he's fused with, specifically Lancelot, Cuchulainn Alter, and finally Jack the Ripper. So, at that point, Mina is basically gone back, to the dorms. So, yeah. So, as midnight, All Might, and finally, wait for a second, Aizawa were there, basically, dumbfounded seeing them, as they would explain that Izuku's gonna die in a few days if he doesn't find a master. So, after telling them this, they should probably find a master very soon. And they have a plan, specifically, the heroic spirits that Izuku's fused with. And so, they would basically start to leave. And for, Bakugo, she would start to leave as well. And for his heroic spirits, they would go back into his body. And we finally ended off that episode at that note. So, yeah. That's a pretty short explanation about what happened last episode. So, let's talk about what happens next. So, we're gonna be in a different perspective, just like last time. So, we're in the perspective of Aizawa, as Aizawa was given instructions by Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper would basically tell her to basically, make video, or more specifically, make a video about, every single student, so you can check if there's, check if they have sufficient, mana reserves, or in this case, magic circuits, which is basically, the equivalent of, how much mana do they have, or for an example. It's basically, Fate bullshit. If you basically want to know a little bit more, just go to the Fate timeline. Or, at least, just, look at the entire, Nasuverse, because, oh boy, that's a lot of bullshit right there. Anyway, so, we go back to Aizawa, as Aizawa would basically tell every single student in her class to basically get ready, as one of them would basically raise their hand. Specifically, Todoroki, as Todoroki would say this. What is it, Miss Aizawa? As Aizawa would basically say this. Well, Miss Todoroki, we're gonna be having a special event soon, so we want all of you to make an introductory video, telling about your name, your likes, dislikes, and also your quirk. And it would be good for you to basically say all those things because we're going to be having the sports festival soon. She would basically explain. And unfortunately, it's a lie. They're not going to be having like the sports festival in due time yet. So they're just going to just gonna be doing this so, Jack the Ripper can see how much mana do they have. So, after telling them this, all of them would basically get excited, including Bakugo, as Bakugo would boast that he's going to become, that she's going to become the #1 hero, no matter what, as everybody is just looking at her angrily. Some of them at least. I mean, some of them already know that, Bakugo is going to win, obviously. But, they're still pretty much angry at her. So, yeah. So, as everybody would be told to basically do a video, as everybody would start going outside doing the video. Some of them don't really need to edit, some decide to edit, so everybody would basically be done with that little assignment as they pass it out to, Aizawa. So, after Aizawa, got all of the videos of them basically doing their little, introductions, so she would basically bring it to the infirmary, where Izuku's, unconscious body is still there, as a certain, Jack the Ripper over there, basically on the side, basically reading some sort of book, as she would say this, here, as she would be, as he would be given the, the footage of every single student in 1A, as she would say this. I meant he got... I mean, I still get confused that, Jack the Ripper, there's like 2 different versions of Jack the Ripper. One of them is still from Fate Strange Fake, and there's the first version of her, which is Jack the Ripper Assassin. So, yeah, Jack the Ripper would be given his, little footage of every single girl in 1A, as he would say this. Thank you, Miss Aizawa. As Aizawa would say this. Anyway, I'll just be getting back to my sleep. I hate my job. She would basically explain as, well, Jack the Ripper would say this. Well, why not quit? As she would say this. I can't. As he would say this. Okay, I guess. So, after reviewing all of the footage of these girls, he would notice 2 candidates for, Izuku's, new master. One of them was a girl by the name of Ida, specifically Tenya Ida, and another seems to be a girl with, purplish hair and with weird-looking ball things. They're definitely not hair, as she would explain that her name was Noro Mineta. So, after seeing their, little introduction tapes, he would decide to go for... As he would basically explain this to All Might, as All Might would say this. So, you decide to go for... As he would say this. Yes, this girl. As he would point at Tenya Ida. As when she saw that, she would say this. I'll tell her later. As he would say this. Good. Just say that, well, it's a special meeting, I guess you can say. And then basically explain about the whole, wait for a sec. The whole, master and servant thing. As one of them would say this, specifically, Aizawa. As he would say this, I meant she. What do you mean by servant? As he would say this. Oh, most people just call us servants. I mean, they're not wrong. I mean, back in the Holy Grail War, we mostly been used to basically make their agendas a little bit more clearly, or more specifically, well, get the Holy Grail. As one of them would say this, specifically Principal Nezu, which Principal Nezu knows about this whole thing, and after hearing about this, she would basically say, wait, Holy Grail? As in that Holy Grail? As he would say this, yep, the Holy Grail was said to be a wish-granting item, and trust me, when used on a mage, or more specifically, mages absolutely covet that thing, to the point that they basically try and kill each other for it, well, they would decide to make a freaking game out of it. As one of them would say this. Then, what is that game exactly, said, Midnight, as he would say this. Well, it's called the Holy Grail War. A war for the Holy Grail. And if one of them, survives or wins this Holy Grail War, they'll be given the Holy Grail, which allows them to basically grant any wish, and only one wish. As one of them would say this. So, you're basically saying that that thing, or should I say you were used to, as you would say this. Yep. Most servants or heroic spirits were actually used for the Holy Grail War as the energy and also the way to fight. Because mages are not really good with hand-to-hand combat, we're mostly sent out to basically kill our enemies. Especially the mages. I mean, I can't remember all that much about the 5th Holy Grail War, but I remembered this kid who actually became an heroic spirit. And the kid actually beaten Gilgamesh. And that is quite surprising in my opinion, as one of them would say this. Wait, Gilgamesh? As one of them would basically, scream out. And this person was Aizawa, as Aizawa would basically say Gilgamesh, as in the first hero, as everybody would just look at her as they would say, first hero? As he would say this. Yep, Gilgamesh, otherwise known as the first hero of man, and the man who basically ended the whole, era, or more specifically, the era of the gods, or the age of the gods, as one of them would say this. What? So you're basically saying that that kid actually defeated the first hero, and as he would say this. Yep, pretty much. And it was quite the spectacle. Apparently he just ripped him apart. I think the reason why he was defeated is because of his goddamn arrogance. I mean, it makes sense, after all. He is a bit of a cunt. As one of them would say this. So you're basically saying that that kid, as you would say this. Yep, and it's a boy. As all of them would just be, in complete shock. As one of them would say this. But how? I mean, I know that there's apparently people that used to have these powers, but still. And apparently boys had these powers as well, and as he would say this. Yep, and it's called Magecraft. Anyway, just bring in that, Tenya Itago very soon so he can, finish up the ritual. I'll give you a list of things to basically bring, and also the instructions on how to do it. As one of them specifically says this, being, Nezu. As Nezu would say this. So, what we're gonna be doing with, your host, as he would say this. Well, I don't know. Maybe, bring him into UA or something? Actually, that's kind of a bad idea. I mean, he will just have a big target on his back, and I mean freaking big. As he would say this. Specifically, All Might, and I meant she, by the way, I meant she. As she would say this. Yeah, but still, how are we going to, as he would say this. How about the dorms? As one of them would say this. The dorms? As he would say this. Yeah, why not? As all of them would just be like, what? As, he would say this. Wait first. Yeah, why the hell not? I mean, he doesn't really have a home, and, his mother probably thinks that he's dead, and probably pretty angry at, her sister, aka your successor, Miss All Might. As All Might would say this. Yeah, I know. As he would say this. Anyway, I should be probably going back. And besides, that manga or whatever you want to call it, it's actually pretty good. Anyway, see ya. As he would basically start moving back to, his seat, as he would grab the manga. As all of them would basically start to leave, as in the end of the day, they would be, maybe late at night, as Principal Nezu would be there in the infirmary, as she would be given the list of, the list of things that she should bring for the ritual to begin. Specifically, the ritual for, Tenya Ito to become, Izuku's new master. As, while she's being given that, the things that, basically the list, you basically get it, as she would basically look over and see Izuku, as Izuku seems to be sweating profusely, as he seems to be hyperventilating, and he also seems to be sweating a lot, as one of them would say this, specifically, wait for a second. Specifically, Recovery Girl, as Recovery Girl would say this. So, why is he, as he would say this? Oh, it's probably taking effect already. As one of them would say this, specifically Principal Nezu. What's taking effect? As he would say this. Well, it's the whole, not having a master thing. Without it, you're basically going to die very soon. And it starts off pretty slow, but then gradually just turns into a horrible, horrible disease. Yeah, let's just say it's gonna be painful for him. Oh well. Anyway, just tell the girl, aka, yeah, I think her name was he would basically start thinking of her name, as she would basically say, being, wait for a second, being Principal Nezu, she would say, you mean Tenya Ida, as he would say this. Ah, yes, Tenya Ida. I want her to basically come here, basically saying that they have a special meeting or something. As she would say this. Very, I guess so. As he would say this. Maybe after school then. As she would say this. Okay, I see. And she would start to leave, being, Principal Nezu. As Recovery Girl would start to, get a bit tired, as she would start to, leave as well. As he would say this. Hey, Recovery Girl! As Recovery Girl would say this. What is it, Jack? As he would say this. Well, I want you to bring me another volume of this manga thing, or whatever. I absolutely love this thing. As she would say this. Huh, I never thought of a serial killer like you to actually like manga. As he would say this. Well, I guess you could say that I kinda changed. He would basically start to laugh a little bit, as she would say this. Anyway, bye. As she would start to leave, as Jack would basically say bye to her. As he would start to look at his host, aka Izuku, still sweating profusely, as he's still, pretty much in pain, as he would say this. Don't worry, kiddo, don't worry. As he would start patting his head, as he would say this. Don't worry. Besides, your new master's coming soon, and I won't let you get hurt at all. He would basically start to remember his past. He would remember back in his days where he was still starting out as a serial killer, mostly killing just for the fun of it, until he saw this girl being mugged by this man, as he would basically defend her. He would not notice that this girl was a, prostitute, but doesn't really care. And so, he would basically save her. But, because of his legend, because of his infamy, he would be split into 3 legends. One was the legend of him actually being a ghost, of several aborted children being fused together, becoming a demonic and horrible demonic spirit, wanting revenge. Another, a story about how Jack the Ripper was actually a demon, because of, Jack's letters, specifically a letter called From Hell, aka one of his freaking noble phantasms, which is basically named after one of his noble phantasms. I mean, the letters basically, you basically get it, the letters basically, the inspiration for, one of his noble phantasms, as it basically says about, him being a demon, blah blah blah, and another legend about him, specifically about him actually being not one person, but an entire gang, making him the embodiment of 2 of these legends, specifically the demon and the gang. That is why he's able to, split into multiple, clones, and also, survive some of those brutal attacks by basically just moving his consciousness into another clone. And that's how he's able to transform into a freaking demon with his noble phantasm called, From Hell, which is coming from, the whole, demon thing, or the demon theory, or whatever. So, yeah. So, after a while of patting, Izuku's head, he would decide to just go back into his body. And so, he would go back into his, host's body, as it's the next day. So, The next day was just a normal last day, as everybody's basically training for the, sports festival. Everybody's completely excited, including Bako wanting to show off, especially if it's towards Izuku, if he wakes up at least. So, after a while of basically training, it's basically the end of the day, as everybody is basically going home. Wait for a second. Except for Ida, as Ida was basically staying in the class because of a special, reason. Apparently, during the end of the class, she was told that she should stay in UA for something important, as everybody's basically going back to their dorm. So, while she's basically staying in her, in the school, basically for a few minutes, as Aizawa arrives back, as she would say this. Alright, you can come with me. As she would say this. What is it, Aizawa? As she would say this. Well, remember the whole incident in the USJ? As she would say this. You mean that guy with the quirk? I mean, it's still pretty surprising that he has a quirk. I mean, boys don't really have quirks. As she would say this. Well, apparently, it's not a quirk. She would basically say, as she would say this. Wait, what? What do you mean, that's not a quirk? I mean, how is that not a quirk? As she would say this. Well, let me show you. As she would be brought to the, infirmary, as she would see the unconscious body of Izuku. As she would say this. Why is he here? I mean, this is an all-girls school, as she would say this. Specifically, Aizawa. Well, if we don't, he'll die. As when she hears this, she would say, he'll die? What do you mean? As she would say this. Well, hey, Jack, you can come out now. As Principal Nezu would basically arrive with, Principal Nezu would basically arrive with, All Might, as Jack would basically appear with the rest of his, other companions, specifically not Jack the Ripper. I mean, he is Jack the Ripper, but still, I meant Jack the Ripper, and also his companions, Cuchulainn Alter, and finally, Lancelot, as Cuchulainn would say this. So that's our new master, eh? Duh, can't believe it had to be her. I mean, she definitely looks like she has like a stick up her ass. As when she hears this, she would be reminded of her first day at UA, when she met up with, Bako, where she was told that she had a stick up her ass, as she would say this. What? As she would basically be scared seeing the man, as he would say this. Oh, are you scared? As he would basically grin at her, as she would be afraid of him, as Jack would say this. Hey, Cuchulainn, can you please stop? I mean, she's basically our new master. Not technically our new master, it's more like, him. As she would basically look towards the direction where she basically, saw Jack basically point at, as she would see Izuku, as she would see this. Wait, master? What do you mean by that? As one of them would say this, specifically, Aizawa. We should tell her now. As, All Might would basically say, yes, we should. As All Might and Aizawa, and also Principal Nezu would basically explain. As after the whole explanation, she would say, excuse me. What? She would basically shout out, as she would say, you're saying that this guy, it's not a quirk, it's magic. As she would say this. Well, it's not really magic, it's magecraft, said, him. As he would basically just like, she would basically look over as she would see, Jack. As Jack would say this. Well, she's right, it's not magic, it's magecraft. As she would say this. What's the difference? As he would say this. Well, actual magic is much more powerful than magecraft. Think of it like this. Like, how do I say this? Magecraft is like, maybe like a $1 store, like, type item, while magic, or true magic as we prefer to call it, is basically like that, pretty fancy shit. As she would basically hear this, as she would say this. Can you stop swearing? as he would basically say this. Sorry, you can't make me stop that. I mean, it's my, part of my legend. As she would say this. What do you mean by legend? As he would say this. Well, allow me to introduce myself. You may call me Jack the Ripper. This is Cucullin Alter, and that's Lancelot. As she would basically look, as she would be surprised, as she would say this. Excuse me, you're Jack the Ripper? The most famous the serial killer? As she would basically say this. Well, specifically Jack, I meant he. Yeah. Yep, I'm Jack the Ripper. And this is Cucullin, the famous Child of Light of Ireland. Former Child of Light of Ireland. And that's Lancelot, the former, well, White Knight of King Arthur. As King Arthur, when, announced, well, let's just say Lancelot was in a rage. Basically, hearing that name is like a trigger word to him. So, yeah, he starts raging, basically screaming out Arthur's name and basically trying killing her. So, when she saw that, she basically jumped out of the way and basically got scared. As she would say this, why is he so... As one of them would say this, specifically, All Might. Well, let's just say he's a bit mad. As he would say this, specifically Jack, as Jack would say this. Yeah, he's a bit unhinged, especially with the whole King Arthur business. Anyway, so, we're gonna be starting off the ritual right now. So, he would basically, smack, he basically claps his hands, as he would basically say this. So, do you have all of the things that we need? As everybody basically got them. Specifically, Principal Nezu. As Principal Nezu would basically get the, large needle that she had, as she would basically prick the finger of, wait for a second, pricking the finger of, Ida, as after she was poked in the finger by that needle, she would say this, ow, that hurt, as he would say this. Now, I want you to grab Izuku's hand, and basically, rub your, blood on his, command seal, or at least his servant seal, as you prefer to call it, as she would say this. Sure. After finding the, servant seal, she would basically put her blood on the, on that servant seal, as Jack would say this. Now, I want you to read this, and that will be the ritual. And after that, you and Izuku would finally be, stable, I guess you can say. I mean, Izuku should be stable. So, after she basically chanted all of the words, including the whole, servant bond thing, she would see that Izuku is basically writhing in pain, basically screaming out at his eyes, his eyes are basically, rolling over, as he would start screaming out saying, "It hurts! It hurts!" As his mark would start changing, transforming into, a brand new servant mark, resembling a large wolf with a stab in the chest by a large sword. After the whole, screaming part is over, he would basically fall back to the ground as he's basically all tired. He would basically go back into a coma as the sweating and also the, hush breathing is basically gone. As he would say this, specifically Jack. So, he's finally much more stable. As she would say this, what the hell happened? And she would basically look over and she basically sees that she has the same mark as where Izuku has his, servant mark. As she would say this, what is this? As she would basically start, trying to scrub it down. As she would say this, is this a tattoo? Then take this off of me. As one of them specifically says this, specifically All Might. Wait, hold on, Miss Ida. As she would say this, what? As, Jack would basically come down from the, little spot where he's basically sitting on, as he would say this. Well, that's your command seal. It allows you to basically force Izuku to do whatever you want, but only 3 times. When those 3 times were over, well, you basically don't have control over him. But he is still your servant. So, just use them in, maybe serious situations. As she would say this. Oh, I see. as he would basically, say this. So, because Izuku's now stable, why not, maybe, let him rest for a while now. I mean, he's still pretty much tired. As one of them would say this, specifically, specifically Recovery Girl. As Recovery Girl would say this. So, what are we going to be doing with him? I mean, he's not allowed in the, infirmary anymore. I mean, he's not even sick. He's not even sick anymore. As he would say this. How about the whole dorms thing, right? Mrs. Nezu? As she would say this. Oh yes, the whole, dorms thing. Well, I have a perfect room for him. It's a private room that I decided to make for him. As he would say this. Thank you, Principal Nezu. Now, how are we going to bring him? As they would basically look at, All Might, as All Might would say this. Oh, yeah. So, as one of them specifically says this, being, Aizawa. So, how are we going to carry him while he's basically, literally visible? As he would say this. I have an idea. As he would basically just, grab, just a piece of cloth and basically started wrapping around Izuku's, unconscious body, as he would basically say this to All Might. Now, start carrying him. As she would say this. Sure. So, as all three of them would basically disappear, as Ida would basically start following them, going back to their dorms. So, after arriving back at the dorms, they would basically make it towards the, secret room, which this room is completely off limits to many of the other students. And this, how do I say this? Wait for a second. And these dorms are only reserved for, Izuku. And this dorm is actually located in, Class 1A's dorm. So, yeah. So, after he was brought to this room is pretty spacious. Matter of fact, it has, training equipment and also a kitchen. As she would say this. Whoa, this place is quite roomy, said, Ida, as she would say this, specifically Principal Nezu. Yeah, I actually meant it for the, for the big three, but this will have to do for Izuku's room now. So, as she would basically wave her hands, as everybody would be brought outside, as Principal Nezu would basically grab the blanket and basically, put it all over, Izuku's body, as she would start to leave the room and basically lock the door. Not really lock the door, more like, keep the door closed, as she would say this. So, Miss Ida, or Miss Tenya, as she would say this. Yeah, what is it, Nezu? As she would say this. Well, I want you to at least explain to him that you're her, your new... Wait for a second. So, I want you to at least explain to him that you are his, new master. And so I want you to, let him, get some rest. And I also want you to sleep with him for now. As when she heard that, she interpreted it as a different type of sleeping, if you get what I mean. As she would basically start to blush, as she would say this. What do you mean by that, Principal Nezu? I mean, we're still pretty young and we can't do that. As she would say this. Not that type of sleeping. I mean, I want you to, take care of him while he's sleeping. And she would say this. Oh, I see. As she would say this. Until he wakes up, well, I want you to explain to him that you're his, new master, and please, act, how do we say this? Nice to him. I mean, most girls will probably just, do those types of things to boys. As she would say this. Oh, you mean the whole... As she would say this. Yeah, I just want you to take care of the boy. I heard from, as she would basically explain about the past between him and also, both Bakugo and Izumi. As she would say this. That's horrible. I mean, I didn't know that Bakugo actually did things to him. And not only that, his own sister. As she would say this. Yeah, but unfortunately it's true. So, I want you to take care of him. okay? So, she would start to leave as she would basically, go back to her, dorm room. As everybody's basically gone back from their, little, trip from outside, basically eating outside, basically just like eating at a restaurant. Well, one of them would basically notice, Ida's there, as one of them would say this, specifically Ochako. Hey, Ida, what are you doing here? And why are you so late? I mean, we brought you takeout, but still, we really wanted you to maybe, join us. As she would say this, I had a bit of a meeting with Principal Nezu. It was something important. As one of them would say this, specifically Bakugo. Teacher's pet. She would basically explain, as Bakugo would basically start to glare at her, as she would say this. Anyway, Miss Katsuki, I should be getting ready to get some sleep. As she would basically grab some of her pillows as she starts getting out of her room. As one of them would say this, specifically, a girl version of, Tokoyami. And this time, Tokoyami doesn't have the bird head. Let's just say she, doesn't have the bird head, but she still has Dark Shadow. And Dark Shadow is going to be male just because. As she would say this, wait, what are you doing? I mean, that's your room, and why are you going outside? As she would say this, I'm planning to sleep in that room. As one of them would say this, specifically, wait for a second. As Jiro would say this, wait, but those rooms are actually reserved for somebody important, and besides, you're not allowed to go in. As she would say this, well, Principal Nezu told me that I'm allowed to go in, and apparently I'm going to be sleeping from there now on. As she would say this, specifically, All Might. Not All Might, I meant, specifically Izumi, as she would say, oh, really? Huh. Anyway, I should be getting some sleep now. I'm kind of tired. As everybody else would recognize that they're also kind of a bit tired as well. So, they would start going back to their rooms to basically get some sleep. And also for, Ida, she would basically go into, she would start to go into the, room where Izuku's basically sleeping in, as she would basically recognize that the, bed is, big enough to basically fit about, 3 people. So, she would basically go onto the bed as she would decide to sleep on the other side. So, after that, both of them and all of the students of, Class 1A would basically fall to sleep. So, this is going to be the end of this episode. So, I hope you liked the video, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you guys next time. Bye-bye!